All right. Well, it's 6:01. We're going to go ahead and get started, and want to thank people for joining us tonight. This Zoom presentation is being videoed, recorded as well, so we can put it on the website. And if people have questions or additional questions, they can refer to it. So just a couple of little housekeeping things on this. Myself, Nick Ouellette, Superintendent of the Hudson School District, will be presenting, and then also Matt Wolford, our lead architect from Bray Architects, will be also talking more about the capital side of the two referendums and what that looks like. And so if you have questions as we're presenting, feel free to enter those into the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat and try to get to all the questions that people may have, so that we can get your questions answered. So again, want to thank everybody for coming, and I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and kick this thing off. So we have two referendum questions coming up on the April 4th ballot, and it all kind of goes back. I'm going to rewind and kind of work backwards a little bit. All this conversation talking about facilities and talking about everything that we have going on really started way back in July of 2019. When we started to look at needing to address some of our elementary facility issues, because we knew that we had a referendum in 2016 that was going to address secondary space, but that really wasn't going to address some of our other challenges that we had at the elementary. And so in 2019, we started having the conversation about putting together a facility task force, and we were just getting ready to start that facility task force in the spring of 2020, and then COVID hit, and it stopped for a while, and so we kind of put a pin in it, for lack of a better term, until the end of 2021. And we did get that facility task force up and running. We did look at some different options in the fall of 2021. And at the end of that process, the board chose not to go to referendum in the spring of 2022. And so, now fast forward, we made some adjustments. We actually changed consultants, now working with Bray Architects again, who we've worked with before, to kind of fast forward to look at different options and different things. But while all of these different things were happening, looking at facilities, we also had a enrollment study done on our district, and that's when it led us to start having some conversations about our enrollment, and are we going to maintain all 6 of our elementaries, and what does that look like, and the capital projects and things along those lines. In November of 2022, so just a few months ago, the board made a decision that if we end up going to referendum, we would delay having the conversation about changing, the number of elementaries that we have, and we may not need to change the number of elementaries we have. Basically, with the board saying, if the operational referendum passes, we'll hold off having that conversation about potentially needing to reduce the number of elementaries we have for at least 3 years, to give it time, from the feedback they got from the community, to give it time to see if our numbers start to bounce back kind of post-COVID and what that looks like. So with all that being said, it brings us to about January of 2023, when the board passed 2 resolutions. And the first resolution I'm going to talk about, the first question, is operating question. So this is to ask the voters of the district, are we able to raise the revenue limit by up to $8 million in any given year to help maintain our operations in the district? And people might say, okay, why is this needed? What are we looking at? And why is this an issue now? Well, we kind of have 4 different things that are kind of working against us, some going up, some going down. Increased operational costs are nothing new to districts, but the last couple of years, the inflation has really taken a bite out of our district budgets, and it's no different than people's personal budgets and things along those lines. So that's been going up. And then in addition to that, with the low unemployment rate, we've had tremendous wage pressure in order to stay competitive, be able to attract and retain a quality workforce. That's put a lot of pressure on wages and things along those lines. So those pressures working upward on us. And then there's 2 things that are kind of working downward against us, and one of the main ones is lower student enrollment. I know that a lot of times that's hard for people to believe, that they see all the construction and things like that going on in the district, and how can it be? But what I can tell you is, over the last 6 or 7 years, we've had over 1,100 housing units built in our school district, and yet we're down, if you take 4K out of the mix, we're down over 600 students. And so, people often will say, are they fleeing to other places or where are they going? Really, we're down similar to our private providers in our district. We just have fewer kids within our attendance boundaries in our district, and it's been a real challenge for us. And it's not unique to Hudson. A lot of districts, especially our size and slightly larger, are seeing enrollments going down because of different trends in the state, and just Wisconsin's getting older, and that's a challenge for us. And then the last item that's working against us a little bit is, our state funding has not quite kept up with inflation, and that's been a challenge for us. And so, yes, we did receive some COVID funding from the federal government, but it wasn't this windfall that a lot of people might project on the news, because when they distributed the COVID funding over the last 2 years, it was distributed based on poverty levels in districts. And so, our district, because we have so little poverty in our district, didn't get to the same level of funding per student as a lot of other districts around the state. And so, those are some of the challenges that we have, some forces working, that are going up, and some that are going down against us, that kind of put us in this position. If you were to look at, the Wisconsin over the last 10 years, in 2011, Wisconsin was spending about $1,200 more per pupil, more per student than the national average in 2011. And since then, in 2020, Wisconsin's actually dropped to about $800, almost below the national average per student spending. And so when you look at that national average is keeping pace roughly with inflation, what you see is, that's about a $2,000 swing when you look at it per child. And so, yeah, just to give you an idea, we have about 5,500 students in our district. That's about $11 million if we would have just kind of kept pace. And so when we talk about, the $8 million operating levy, that's really, to try to help kind of stop some of that gap. A lot of times people will say, well, this seems to be mismanagement, fund mismanagement, finance mismanagement. You guys should have seen this coming. Well, we have seen the fiscal cliff coming, and that's why we've been making adjustments. And so what we've done over the last 8 to 10 years, we have reduced 18 sections of elementary classrooms. So 18 classroom reductions at the elementary, 10 to 12 classrooms at the middle school. We've reduced a little bit at the high school. We've eliminated a principal position, a director position, assistant director positions, custodian positions, secretary positions. We've done a lot of cuts on the expenditure side and tried to, balance, some of our challenges through just cuts. But what's happened now is we're at a point where we need some help on the revenue side. Just balancing the budget, trying to cut, it's not working. And so when you look at across the state, last November, there were 40 districts that went for an operating referendum. And this April, in 2 weeks, there are 51 school districts going for operating referendums across the state of Wisconsin. So 90 school districts across the state in the last basically 4 or 5 months have had to go for the same type of operating, some type of operating referendum to help make ends meet for a variety of reasons. And right now, over 80% of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin utilize operating referendums to make ends meet. The last time the district went for an operating referendum was in 2001. We asked for $1.7 million on our operating budget back in 2001. And so we haven't had to come back from an operational standpoint since 2001. So we are trying to look at, what's the best way to kind of do this. Sometimes people will say, well, where's this money going to go? How does this affect things? This is really about maintaining a lot of what we currently have. It's about maintaining class sizes, curricular offerings, having competitive wage and benefits and things along those lines, and making sure that we can continue to deliver the program that our communities become accustomed to. And so that's where this is going. It's not to expand the district or anything along those lines. It is really to continue to make ends meet as we move forward. Moving to the second question, this is where I'm going to turn it over to Matt Wolford. This is a question that has to do with the facilities. And so when the board made the decision that, hey, in November, we're not going to look at reducing the number of elementaries. I said, that's fine, but we do have some elementaries that we know long-term we're going to hold on to, and the middle school, and we have some long-term needs there. And construction's not getting any cheaper the further we go down. And so asking the board, can we at least look at a capital question or a construction question to address North Hudson, EP Rock, and the middle school? Because we know those buildings are going to be having kids in them for a very long time. And so we have some things that we need to address there. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, appreciate it. Good. Thank you all for joining this evening. Glad you're learning a little bit more, hopefully, about both of the questions that are being proposed. So as Nick noted, the second question on the ballot will be a capital question for $29 million, which we will walk you through some of the needs and potential solutions that are being proposed at the three buildings. So the first slide here really summarizes what are the needs we have. So within the 29 million, you can see this breakdown. Much of this is on plumbing, HVAC, electrical technology, site improvements. That's 41%, as you can see on the left side of the screen, of all of the overall investments. And it's important to know that that isn't because of neglect. It's not because the district hasn't cared for the facilities. The facilities are clean and they're operating, but many of these systems are really at the end of useful life. And the repair costs are not just about putting the simple fix or the Band-Aid on, they're about major replacements. And that's really why they're included in the referendum question, because it's about bigger ticket items that really can't be funded effectively through the operating budget. In addition, you can see on the right-hand side, just on other parts and pieces of the project, roofs, windows, bathrooms, educational space, and gyms. And I'll point those out as we move through the three school buildings. So the first building is EP Rock, and I'll go a little deeper on this one, and then we'll summarize on the next, because some of the needs really do overlap building to building and are very similar. So as noted before, the district has done a great job at taking care of and maintaining buildings as best they can within the constraints of an operating budget. It's not at all unique to Hudson. As Nick noted earlier, the budget pressures on the operating side face every district. And so these major expenditures like this, the way the school funding formula works in Wisconsin, it really is set up that local taxpayers are asked to generally participate. So you'll see on the screen some of the things on the secure entrance side. The project at EP Rock would create a new secure entrance on the south side of the school. We'll show you that in a second, and add a sprinkler system. The current building does not have one and does not meet current codes. Building envelope, really that's the exterior of the building. So you can see here it's windows, roofs, doors, etc. Plumbing, the water piping, much of it's original to the original construction. So it would be normal to think that that is aging to the point where it would need to be replaced. And then HVAC, the 1950s and 60s unit ventilators, that's the unit that sits in the classroom and pushes air into the classroom. Many of those are original. Again, the district's done a great job keeping those pieces going, but a major improvement is needed. Electrical services, generators, fire alarm systems, LED, energy efficient lighting, very important. And then improving the site with drop off and pickup and some playground equipment. So those are really kind of summarizing the needs, but also some of the scope that would be accomplished if the EP Rock project is to be approved. So you can see on the screen an aerial image that gives the overlay of the site along with the footprint of the building. And the yellow dashed line really is representative of all of the, what I'll say is infrastructure pieces, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, roofs, windows, doors. Really that the yellow line is suggesting that we're going to address those needs across the entire building. So it's important to note when you look at this that much of the improvements that are being proposed, if the project is approved and completed, you may walk in and not see some of them because many of them are going to be above ceilings and behind walls, but they're really critical to the success of a school building, providing safe plumbing, ventilation, heating, cooling, air quality really is an important aspect of providing a good quality learning environment to students. We'll start with number one. So the first piece really is looking at our current secure entrance at the school is working. It's got a vestibule, but it does require kind of a number of challenging steps to get visitors into the school building without them crossing paths with students that are moving through the hall. So this piece would move and build a new secure entrance, excuse me, at number one on the south side of this plan. When that is done, that would allow number 2 in the plan to be renovated. So that is the current office space and health room. When we say we're renovating for current educator to offer educational space, it's important to note that that is not increasing the capacity of the school. We're not adding more classrooms to move kids here. As Nick noted, we're declining in enrollment, so that isn't needed. But what is needed at the schools, these were built well before many of the special programs that special ed and other things are offered to students. If you were in this building, you'd see learning happening in the hallways, behind partition walls and not ideal acoustical situations. So we'll be able to recreate some of those things that are happening in hallways and provide dedicated space for those students and for those programs. Number 3 is bathroom renovations. Many of these are original to the era of construction. So as you can imagine, they've aged. They're not ADA compliant, and we'd be able to address all of that with the bathroom renovations. And then from the site perspective, replacing some aging asphalt. As I noted earlier, some similar challenges, quite frankly, at North Hudson. For the most part, really the challenges that we face with the aging North Hudson building are similar. So you can see those on the screen. A couple of things that are slightly different are from the site perspective, the playground equipment was replaced within the last year, 2 years. So that you'll see is not noted here. But in addition, as we get to the plan, we will show you whereby we have some gym and cafeteria challenges that we're facing. Our current gym is also our cafeteria at North Hudson. So when half of the cafeteria or gym is being used for cafeteria, it limits a bit our ability to provide Phi-Ed curriculum to students and can have an impact on their day. We also have a need for gymnastics space within the district. So as we transition to this next slide, Nick, I don't know if you wouldn't mind touching on the specific needs and why would gymnastics be at an elementary school?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. So, a few years back, we have a great gymnastics program, but a few years back, we used to rent time at the local gymnastics space that was over, I think, off of Hanley. And when that business no longer was operating, it really left us with a hole of where to practice. So currently, our girls gymnastics team is practicing in a storage closet. Facility, I guess, at the high school. It's not ideal. Everything's jammed in there. And then for them to do any of their floor work, they're driving to Oakdale or down to River Falls to try to get time in those places. And really, it starts to become a Title IX issue because we're not providing the same level of access and the same level of space, across all of our extracurriculars, especially as it relates to male and female sports. And so really, when we started to look at needing to have a space for gymnastics, we started to look at what's the most cost-effective way to handle this. So what's going to have the least amount of impact on the district or the taxpayers of the district? And that's where North Hudson came into play as we started to have this conversation. And I think it's just to note, not all of our high school athletics happen at the high school. So baseball happens over at the middle school, the pool's at the middle school, hockey, we rent ice time at the local ice rinks. The golf team obviously plays on private courses. So it's not uncommon for our teams to have facilities or practice facilities in other spots. But so when this came up, Matt can kind of talk to it. This seemed like one of the most inexpensive ways for us to address that issue and have a nice space for our kids to use, but also not have to spend tremendous amounts of money in order to make that happen.
Yeah, so thank you, Nick. So as you see on the plan, item number 1 would be constructing a new gymnasium. It's a 1-court gymnasium with some bathrooms and storage to support it, but it really is designed to become the primary Phi-Ed space for elementary students throughout the day. That would allow us in number 6 to convert the current gymnasium / cafeteria into a gymnastic space. And it's important. Some would say, well, why can't that be the gym for elementary kids during the day and Phi-Ed after school? If you've ever seen the floor and all the equipment that it requires to practice and compete in gymnastics, it is not the type of equipment that you can simply take up and set down day to day without a significant impact on not only the equipment, but also just on the day-to-day operations of the facility. So by creating the new gymnasium for elementary Phi-Ed and community use in the evenings, like many of the district's gyms, We would also then create the dedicated gymnastics space. The kitchen currently actually is the space that falls between number 7 and number 6 on this plan. So when we, in number 7, convert the current library to become our cafeteria, the big advantage to that is we have to do some very minor revisions to how students are served in that space, but we don't have to undertake the major investment associated with a kitchen relocation. So this really does set up well to have our current library in number 7 become our cafeteria, the kitchen space exists in between, and the current gym becomes gymnastics. As we move further through the building, the number 3s, as were noted on the prior plan at EP Rock, are bathroom renovations. Number 4 is our asphalt replacement. The gym is currently proposed to be built over some asphalt that's used for a variety of purposes. So that's why you see number 5, additional parking located to the right of the number 1 gym addition. And then number 7 would be, number 2 in this plan would be creation of the new library. So again, we would take the current library for cafeteria, number 2 becomes the library. Also important to note, just the yellow dashed line, as was noted on EP Rock, all of those really important buildings, systems, and infrastructure improvements would also be included here at North Hudson. And the final project is Hudson Middle School. And it's really, I think, important to note here that these really are much less visible improvements, as was noted with some of the EP Rock and North Hudson. In general, the middle school, especially with the improvements made in the last referendum, is serving the district well from a space perspective. There are some minor tweaks that could be made to enhance teaching and learning, which we'll touch on. But big picture, this is really about shoring up some of the capital maintenance and infrastructure needs. As you can see here, some roof replacement. HVAC really is a big area of need here. The majority of this budget really is in the HVAC system in terms of improving and replacing aging equipment, adding a building automation system. That's architectural jargon, unfortunately. That really is the controls. It's the thermostat we all have in our home, but you can imagine a large school building that's a much more complex system. And this is 25 plus years old at this point. Electrical improvements you can see here, including updating the fire alarm system, and then some basic improvements in the areas of toilet rooms and bathrooms for students, and improving the educational spaces with some aging flooring and replacing cabinetry.
All right, so that brings us to a lot of what our frequently asked questions are. And I'll kind of run through some of these. And again, feel free to put any additional questions you have in the chat, and we'll monitor that. So if people have questions, we'll try to make sure we get to them. But the big question people want to know is, what is this going to cost me? You know, and what does this look like? And so what you can see in this slide is basically if both questions pass for the district, both the operational question and the capital question, it's about a 28-cent increase to the current mill rate. So the mill rate was $8.84 for the taxes that just happened. It would jump to about $9.12. And so you can see what our historic mill rate has been, and what this looks like, and how we still will be below what the average mill rate has been over the last 10 years. But we should be in a really, really good spot. Just to give you some context, the high school project, when we did it in 2016, we said the mill rate increase was going to be 90 cents over what it was in previous years. And we're now down to it's costing about 48 cents to make the debt, additional cents to make those debt payments at the high school. So we were able to, under promise and over deliver, at least on that increase. And I know that, the mill rate is the only thing that we have control over. We don't have the control over people's house values, and we don't have control over reassessments by municipalities and things like that. But what does it mean to people? So the first question, the $8 million question, it's about 12 cents. And the second question is about 16. And I'm going to talk about how we get to that 12 cents in the next slide. But essentially what it means is for every $100,000 worth of house value, it's about $12 for the first question. So if you have a $300,000 house, the first question would be about $36 for the year. If you have a $500,000 house, it's going to be more like $60 for the year. The second question, both of them combined were to pass, a $300,000 house is going to be about $84 for the year, increase to property tax. And if you had a $500,000 house, it'd be about $140 for the year increase in taxes as it relates to the referendum. And some people say, well, Nick, how do you get to 12 cents? The county has a referendum, and they're not even asking for $8 million, and yet their mill rate impact is even higher than yours. And well, this is the slide that really kind of explains that, and you can dig into it a little bit more. But essentially, you're right. To get $8 million of operating, it's really about $1.28. But what we're able to do is we're able to kind of buy down that mill rate impact by retiring some referendum debt, some existing debt. There's also some reduction in the new funding formula, and then there's some property tax growth as new people come online, as new construction comes online. That helps spread the burden across a larger group of people. And so really, it is about a 12 cent increase for question number one. Now, somebody might say, okay, well, if it doesn't pass, doesn't that mean that my taxes could go down $1.16? And the answer to that question is maybe. And the reason I say that is the board could choose to continue to try to prepay down debt and keep the debt, the debt service levies up so that we can pay down debt sooner, or they could reduce the levy. But so that's why I don't want to make a promise that yes, for sure it could go down. But I also don't want people to think and have us be disingenuous to say yes, that could be a possibility, but not a guarantee. Now, sometimes people will say, what happens if the referendum doesn't pass, the operational referendum doesn't pass, or even the capital referendum? And so it is not the sky is falling. It is not, if it doesn't pass on April 4th, all of a sudden April 5th, we're laying off hundreds of people or anything along those lines. And we don't want to, have that type of mentality. What it really means is, we are then going to have to put some plans in place. One, to try to go to referendum again in February of 24, but two, that if it does not pass by February 24, that's when we will have to start making pretty substantial reductions to how we deliver our programming at the district. And, and it talks about, it could mean increased class sizes, consolidations of schools, and maybe some reduction in certain, electives and co-curricular offerings. And so again, we don't want to say either do this or this is going to happen, but we want to at least be upfront so people understand there will come a point where we can't just float some of these deficit budgets with savings. I mean, there would be a point we would come to where we'd run out of savings, and so we would have to start making some pretty significant cuts to our budget in order to stay in the black. And then as far as maintenance goes, it's going to be to continue to try to, put Band-Aids on things and deal with maintenance needs on an emergency basis. And then, try to consider down the road, trying to go to referendum again to see if we can figure out, if there's a different option. I see a question in the chat. It says, I think almost all understand gyms, libraries, kitchens at North Hudson, but can you explain why the elementary school needs such an enormous gym space area 1+6? So I'm just going to go back to that slide so people can kind of see. So essentially what happens is the number one is that becomes the elementary gym. And it's, the number 6 space really becomes a dedicated gymnastics facility that can be used by the community, that would be used by obviously our team as well. But, and I guess during the day, if elementary, if the elementary wanted to use it and they had a tumbling unit or something along those lines, they could use it. But really the dedicated gym space is number one. And just to give you some perspective, it's like EP Rock's gym or Hudson Prairie's gym. It's not a 4-station gym or anything like that. It's just a standard elementary gym is what we'd be looking at North Hudson. As I continue to kind of look at some of these things and kind of working our way through, just kind of as we get towards the end of the presentation. And again, if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and we want to answer them. We do believe that having a strong and viable school system keeps property values high. It makes for a strong community to live in, and makes it for a great place where people want to live. And so we hope that and we believe that we are providing a good return on the community's investment in our schools. And we know that it is a big investment, and we know that the community does spend a lot of money on the Hudson School District, and we take that responsibility and the spending of that money, we take that very seriously. And so we want to make sure people understand that, and that when we do ask for additional money, we want to make sure that we're getting people's questions answered. I'm going to continue to look at the chat and see if we have any additional questions. I do want to draw your attention. So we do have an in-person meeting coming up on Thursday, on the 23rd. It'll be at North Hudson Elementary School. So if you prefer to ask your questions in person versus the chat, or have more of a dialogue, we absolutely would welcome that opportunity to talk with you and answer additional questions. You can also go to our website, and right at the top of our website, you'll see a spot where it says April 4th referendum. You click on that. It has all of the information that we've been talking about as we work through this. So it looks like another question just came in. Hold on a second. My biggest question is, where does Willow and Holton fall into these conversations? From what we know from Stillwater, they closed schools and then attendance skyrocketed. How do we learn from their mistakes? Sorry, you already addressed this. Well, what I would tell you is Willow and Holton, what the board has basically said is we're going to hold off on doing anything with Willow and Holton for 3 years, at least, if the referendums were to pass, to see if enrollment is going to rebound and what that looks like. Currently in our elementary schools, we have space for 2,900 elementary students. So we currently have just over 2,000 elementary students. So we do have a lot of space and a lot of capacity in our current setup. But it is something we'd watch. We did have an enrollment study done. We hired a demographer to do that, and their projected enrollment for us is for us to kind of best case scenario stay where we are, and kind of worst case scenario drop by another 300 or 400 more students over the next 5 to 7 years before we kind of level off. And so, as of right now, there are no signs that are pointing to us having attendance skyrocket like you're seeing over in Stillwater or South Washington with some of those things. And I think with Stillwater, their attendance is skyrocketing on the south side of their district, and they looked at closing some of their buildings on the north side where they were having attendance issues. They weren't having a lot of growth, and so that's one of the challenges there. So I will look and see if there's any other additional questions. All right. Well, I do want to thank people for joining us tonight for the for this opportunity to speak with you about the referendum and get information out. Again, I would encourage you that if you have additional questions, you can always email me. My email is on the screen, or you can email us at connections@hudsonraiders.org, and we'll try to get your questions answered to the best of our ability, and try to work through this. We appreciate you taking the time tonight. We know everybody has very busy schedules, but I will say a lot of what we'll talk about on Thursday will be the same presentation. But if you want to be able to have more of a face-to-face conversation, again, would invite you to come to the presentation on Thursday at North Hudson. And this is just a reminder, please get out and vote, regardless of the direction you want to go. Just get out and vote on April 4th. Elections are important, and we just want to encourage people to vote. So without any further questions, I am going to sign off from here. And like I said, this has been recorded. You can feel free to refer back to the beginning parts of the presentation if you joined late. And if that sparks additional questions for you, feel free to reach out and we'll try to get those answered. So I want to thank everybody for joining us and really appreciate your time.